Imagine a single mom working as a janitor, invisible to everyone around her. One night, while cleaning a boardroom, she solved a $500 million problem in just seconds, something entire teams of financial experts couldn't do. What happened next shocked the CEO, and left the entire company speechless. This is her unbelievable story. She was just a janitor, at least, that's what everyone thought. Maria Alvarez, a single mom in her late 20s, pushed her squeaky mop bucket down the glossy marble floors of a billion-dollar financial firm. Her uniform was plain, a gray polo tucked neatly under a blue apron, yellow cleaning gloves covering her hands, and a small pair of earbuds tucked into her ears. She moved quietly, almost invisible, blending into the background of the towering glass building. To the high-powered executives who worked there, Maria was just another face in the crowd. They walked past her without greeting, their eyes glued to phones or briefcases, consumed by stock reports and market updates. She was the person who emptied their trash cans, wiped their desks, and polished their windows. If she did her job perfectly, nobody noticed. If she made one mistake, everyone did. But behind her tired eyes and quiet demeanor lived a mind few could ever imagine. Maria wasn't just a janitor. Years ago, she had been a bright student with dreams that stretched far beyond a mop and broom. She had an uncanny gift for mathematics. Numbers, to her, were not just digits on a page, they were puzzles, patterns, and rhythms. She could spot relationships in equations the way musicians hear melodies in music. Professors often shook their heads in amazement at her speed. "You don't just solve math, Maria," one of them had once said, "you see it." But life doesn't always follow equations. During her second year of college, Maria fell in love. The relationship gave her a son she cherished, but it also brought heartbreak when her husband abandoned them both. Bills mounted, tuition became impossible, and her dreams of finishing her degree slipped away. With no family to lean on, she took the first job she could get, janitorial work. It was steady, it paid just enough, and it allowed her to be there for her son. So, night after night, she walked the polished halls of the financial firm, her mop and broom her tools for survival. But while her hands worked, her mind never stopped. She often caught herself glancing at the glowing monitors in the analysts' rooms. She didn't understand all the financial jargon, but the math behind it, the equations, the algorithms, the patterns, those spoke to her. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Maria entered the executive boardroom. The smell of strong coffee still lingered in the air, and scattered papers covered the massive oak table. On the whiteboard at the front of the room were complex equations, written in a rush, arrows pointing in every direction. The ink was messy, the handwriting hurried, but Maria's sharp eyes focused instantly. Her mop bucket came to a stop. She tilted her head, studying the numbers. Something about them looked wrong. She set her mop aside and took a slow step toward the board. The equations weren't just random scribbles, these were high-level financial calculations, the kind that predicted market crashes or massive gains. Her eyes darted back and forth between the whiteboard and the 3 computer monitors still glowing at the CEO's desk. Each screen displayed charts of plummeting stocks, red arrows pointing down, and numbers dropping fast. Her heart skipped. She didn't know the details, but she could tell the company was in trouble. The handwriting on the board told the story of panic. Someone had tried to fix the numbers but failed. The calculations were inconsistent, as if the analysts had hit a dead end. Maria felt something stir inside her, the same spark she used to feel back in her university days, when professors handed her unsolvable problems just to see if she could prove them wrong. Her mind began connecting dots automatically. She could see the mistake in the equations as clearly as a typo in a sentence. But she froze. What was she doing? She was just a janitor. Her job was to clean floors, not correct billion-dollar financial mistakes. She imagined the CEO walking in, furious at her for touching things she had no business touching. Still, she couldn't walk away. She felt it in her bones, she knew the solution. Maria looked back at her mop, then at the marker left carelessly on the table. Slowly, almost without realizing it, she reached for the marker. Her hand trembled as she uncapped it. The sound of the marker squeaking against the whiteboard echoed through the silent room as she began to rewrite the equations. Line after line, number after number, she rearranged formulas, canceled out errors, and simplified complex expressions. Her hand moved quickly, almost instinctively, as if the solution had been waiting inside her mind all along. And then, it clicked. In less than a minute, Maria had transformed the mess into a clean, balanced solution. She stepped back, breathing heavily, staring at the numbers with both awe and fear. She had just solved a problem worth $500 million. At that very moment, she heard footsteps behind her. Maria froze, the marker still in her hand. Slowly, she turned her head. Standing in the doorway, watching her every move, was none other than the CEO himself. The financial firm was in chaos, though most of the world outside had no idea yet. Inside the building's glass walls, panic was spreading like wildfire. The company had invested heavily in global markets, and overnight, unexpected changes had shaken everything. One wrong calculation, one flawed prediction, and the firm stood to lose nearly $500 million. The analysts, men and women in sharp suits, had been working around the clock. Coffee cups littered their desks, computer monitors glowed with red arrows pointing downward, and papers filled with scribbled numbers lay scattered everywhere. Their faces told the story: fear, exhaustion, and desperation. They were supposed to be the best of the best, graduates from Ivy League schools, experts with years of training. Yet for all their education and experience, they couldn't untangle the problem. Every formula they wrote seemed to fall apart. Every solution they tried led to a dead end. The pressure was unbearable. They knew the CEO's patience was wearing thin, and the shareholders would not tolerate failure. A $500 million mistake could sink the company, cost thousands of jobs, and ruin reputations overnight. In the middle of this chaos, Maria quietly entered the office with her mop and cleaning supplies. She didn't belong to their world of expensive suits and million-dollar deals, yet she was there every night, silently cleaning up after them. Normally, no one even glanced at her. Tonight was no different, except for one thing. She could see something they couldn't. Her eyes landed on the giant whiteboard at the front of the room. Lines of equations stretched across it, but to her, the errors practically screamed for attention. She saw numbers mismatched, variables misplaced, and formulas forced together in ways that didn't make sense. What looked like a mountain of confusion to the analysts looked like child's play to her sharp mathematical mind. She paused, her mop leaning against the wall, and stared harder. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could already see the solution forming in her head, like a puzzle arranging itself into the right picture. But another thought stopped her: I shouldn't. I'm just the janitor. This isn't my job. She tried to push the thought aside. She dipped the mop into the bucket, swishing the water, forcing herself to focus on the floor instead of the board. But her mind wouldn't let go. Every time she looked back, the mistakes jumped out at her. The numbers begged to be fixed. Maria bit her lip, torn between fear and instinct. She knew if anyone caught her touching that board, she could be fired instantly. But she also knew that if she didn't do something, the company was about to lose everything. Finally, almost against her own will, she set the mop aside. She picked up the marker lying on the table. Her hand trembled slightly, but once she touched the board, her confidence returned. Numbers had always been her safe place, her world where everything made sense. Line by line, she began erasing errors and rewriting the equations. To her, it was like solving a riddle she'd seen 100 times before. She simplified one section, canceled out unnecessary terms, and reorganized the sequence. Her hand moved faster now, steady and sure, as though she were back in her university classroom. Seconds turned into minutes, but to Maria, time seemed to stop. She was completely absorbed, her mind alive in a way it hadn't been in years. And then, just like that, the solution appeared. She stepped back, staring at the board. The impossible problem had unraveled into a clear, elegant solution. It was all there: the pattern, the fix, the answer that could save the company $500 million. Her chest rose and fell as she tried to process what she had just done. She wasn't supposed to touch those numbers. She wasn't supposed to know those numbers. Yet she had solved them in seconds, while trained analysts had struggled for hours. At that moment, Maria felt both exhilaration and fear. Exhilaration, because she knew she had saved the company from disaster. Fear, because she realized what this meant. If anyone found out she had meddled with the calculations, they might not praise her. They might punish her. Just then, a faint sound echoed from the hallway, footsteps. Maria froze, the marker still in her hand. Slowly, she turned her head toward the door. And there he was. The CEO himself, standing in the doorway, watching her with eyes full of shock and... The CEO, Richard Anderson, was not a man who was easily surprised. He had built his reputation as one of the toughest leaders in the financial world. He was known for spotting opportunities, for making decisions under pressure, and for running his billion-dollar firm with absolute control. But that night, as he stood in the doorway of the boardroom, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, utter disbelief. There, standing in front of his whiteboard, was Maria, the janitor he had seen countless times pushing her mop down the halls. Only now, she wasn't holding cleaning supplies. She was holding a marker, her gloved hand still slightly smudged with ink. And on the board, the chaotic, scrambled equations his top analysts had been struggling with all day were suddenly neat, balanced, and, impossibly, correct. "Wait, did you just solve this?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Maria froze. Her heart raced, her fingers tightened around the marker. She hadn't expected to be caught, and certainly not by him. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a split second, she saw a mixture of shock, suspicion, and something else, curiosity. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I shouldn't have touched it. I was just cleaning, and I saw the numbers. They didn't look right. I thought maybe," she stopped, realizing how foolish she must sound. A janitor, daring to correct the work of financial experts? Richard stepped closer, his eyes narrowing on the equations. He knew enough math to recognize when something was correct, and what he saw on the board wasn't luck. It was precision. Elegant, even. The kind of clarity only someone with deep mathematical talent could achieve. "You did this?" he asked again, softer this time, almost as if he couldn't believe the words himself. Maria swallowed hard. "Yes, but I didn't mean to interfere. Numbers make sense to me. I saw the mistake, and my hands just moved before I could stop them." The CEO turned back to the board. He read through each line, each adjustment she had made. And with every second, his astonishment grew. This wasn't just some random correction, this was the solution. The very thing his highly paid analysts had been desperately trying to figure out for hours. Behind him, two senior analysts had walked in, drawn by the CEO's raised voice. They looked at the board, then at Maria, then back at the board again. Their jaws dropped. This is it," one of them whispered. "She fixed it." Maria felt her face heat with embarrassment. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the floor. "Please don't be angry," she said quietly. "I wasn't trying to show off. I just thought maybe it could help." But instead of anger, Richard did something no one expected. He smiled, just slightly at first, then broader. His shock was transforming into admiration. "Help," he said, his tone almost amused. "You didn't just help. You saved us $500 million. The room fell completely silent. The analysts glanced at one another, speechless. For once, the smartest people in the building had no words. The janitor had done what they couldn't. Maria looked down, almost ashamed. She had been invisible for so long that recognition felt strange, uncomfortable. Yet in that moment, she realized something powerful: her gift hadn't disappeared with her dreams. It had only been waiting for the right moment to shine. And Richard Anderson, the CEO who thought he had seen it all, realized something too. He had underestimated someone standing right under his nose, a woman whose talent could change everything. News spread through the company faster than wildfire. By the next morning, almost everyone had heard the unbelievable story: the janitor had solved the $500 million problem. At first, many employees refused to believe it. Surely, it was just a rumor, a misunderstanding. How could someone who pushed a mop and scrubbed bathrooms accomplish what entire teams of Ivy League-educated analysts couldn't? But when they saw the whiteboard, neatly filled with Maria's corrections, and when the analysts confirmed that her solution had been flawless, the truth became impossible to deny. The woman they had overlooked for years had outsmarted them all. For Maria, the sudden attention was overwhelming. The same people who had once walked past her without so much as a nod were now staring, whispering, and even trying to strike up conversations. She wasn't used to it. She had been invisible for so long that being the center of attention felt unreal. Later that day, the CEO, Richard Anderson, called her into his office. She entered nervously, still wearing her janitor's uniform, her hands fidgeting as she stood before his massive desk. He didn't start with a lecture or questions about why she had touched the board. Instead, he simply asked, "Maria, where did you learn to do that?" So, she told him her story. She spoke about her love for math, her days as a promising student, and the dreams she had put on hold when her husband walked out. She explained how she worked nights so she could spend the day with her son, and how every number she saw seemed to speak to her like an old friend. Richard listened silently, his expression unreadable. But inside, he was humbled. He realized that he, and everyone else, had judged her by her uniform, not her ability. They had looked at her as just a janitor, never considering that hidden behind her tired eyes was a genius mind. When she finished, he leaned forward and said, "Maria, you're not just someone who cleans our offices. You're someone who saved this company. And I don't intend to let your talent go unnoticed ever again." For the first time in years, Maria felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The next morning, Maria walked into the office building with a completely different feeling in her chest. For years, she had pushed her mop bucket through those same glass doors, unnoticed and unappreciated. But today, the security guard smiled at her. Employees who usually ignored her gave her nods of respect. Something had changed, everything had changed. Instead of being handed a mop, Maria was handed an offer letter. Richard Anderson, the CEO, had called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. He explained how Maria had single-handedly solved the financial crisis that threatened to destroy the company. At first, the board members were skeptical, but once the analysts confirmed her solution, the truth was undeniable. In front of everyone, Richard announced his decision. "From this day forward, Maria is no longer our janitor. She is our newest senior financial analyst." Gasps filled the room. Some applauded. Others looked stunned. But no one could deny the brilliance of what she had done. The offer wasn't just symbolic. It came with a six-figure salary, benefits, and the chance to lead a small team. For Maria, it felt like stepping into a dream she had abandoned long ago. She was finally being recognized for the person she truly was, not the uniform she wore. But Richard didn't stop there. At the next shareholder meeting, he stood on stage and invited Maria to join him. The massive screen behind them displayed the words, "The woman who saved $500 million." He introduced her not as an employee, but as a hero. "Maria reminds us all," he said firmly, "that greatness doesn't come from titles, degrees, or expensive suits. Sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected places. And if we're wise enough to recognize it, we all benefit." The audience erupted in applause. Some even stood to give her a standing ovation. Maria, humbled and emotional, simply bowed her head and whispered a silent thank you. That night, when she returned home, her son ran into her arms. She told him everything, that she wasn't just a janitor anymore, but someone who had proven her worth. Tears filled his eyes as he said, "I always knew you were special, Mom." Maria smiled through her tears. She had gone from overlooked janitor to celebrated genius, and in doing so, she proved to the world, and to herself, that true talent can never stay hidden forever. And that's how a single mom janitor went from mopping floors to saving $1 billion company, and changing her life forever. If you were inspired by Maria's journey, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.